Hey everyone, this is Team Decker. Recently I had a pleasure of testing a couple of very indie games on my deck. And what I mean by very indie is that those games were made by either small studios or even just one person in some cases. I decided to combine gameplays of these games into one video to show you, first, a couple of interesting games. Second, how smoothly those games actually work on the deck, even without, I assume, the devs having access to the actual device. Plus, all the games in this video have been released in June 2022, so they are all very recent, a few weeks old at most. We start with a very cutesy platforming game, Super Ember Kaboom. The game has some Kirby vibes in my opinion, partly because the attacks that the main character is using remind me of some of the more funky attacks in Kirby. What I really like is that beating one level in the game takes about 1 to maybe 3 minutes, so it's really a perfect game to just start and play it in very short bursts. The only problem in terms of running the game on Steam Deck is lag of 800p, so the game has black bars at the top and at the bottom of the screen. Plus, there seem to be some very minor micro stutter, but you won't really notice it while you play. You're just gonna notice it in the very beginning. Generally, I recommend the game. I actually went back to it a few times after recording the gameplay for the game. So yeah, go and play it because it's pretty cool. Next game is Logicality, a logic game but with open world. Interesting concept, many of the puzzles seem to be done cleverly and the graphics actually look pretty nice. The game runs pretty stable on the deck at medium settings, and if you boost it to ultra you will get some dips, but you can get steady 40 FPS still, so that's pretty good. The game does not seem to have a controller support, but the default WSD plus mouse config on the deck seem to work well enough. Next one I think might be the most low budget game on the list, and that's Yakyosho. This is a low poly, and I mean a very low poly, like PS1 era, maybe a bit earlier, horror game from a little development studio. You are a Japanese teacher in the game and you wake up in a haunted school or something along those lines. Your task is to light up 12 lanterns spread across the school while avoiding some creepy opponents. This is another game that does not have controller support, unfortunately, but deck easily fixes it by providing the WSD plus mouse config. The only thing you have to do is to pick a button for the Q key, which allows you to browse your equipment in the game. Cube Decider is a game in which you are a cube and you have to get to the exit of each of the 50 plus levels. It's a mix of RPG with turn-based combat and a logic game. Interesting concept again, the graphics are nothing special to say the least, but the game by default costs about $4, which I would say is actually a decent price for what you're getting. Game runs well on Steam Deck at 60 FPS, takes a bit too much battery than I would like it to, but when you set the 30 FPS cap, it looks a bit too choppy for me, so I still recommend going for like low settings plus 60 FPS, and that will not take that much as battery as like the highest settings plus 60 FPS. Meet Me at Noon looks actually the most high budget of all these games, or at least the most professional, I would say. It looks like something that can be one day a hit on the Nintendo eShop, and I'm pretty serious about it. Another logic game with kind of simplistic but very pretty graphics, and you have two characters to control. One of them moves only during the day, the only one only during the night. It's a bit difficult to explain in words, but if you like logic games, I think you should actually just go and pick up the game. It's pretty tough, but that's because the levels are made really in a clever way. And if you experiment, you're gonna get to the solution in the end. Highly recommend it. The sixth game on the list is How I Learned to Skate, a game about not skateboarding, but ice skating. The controls are extremely unique. You control each of your legs with one of the bumpers and your body with the analog stick. Graphics are, in my opinion, amazingly beautiful for a top-down game, but man, the game is hard. I assume with time you can get accustomed to the controls, but in the beginning it feels like it's gonna be a bit cliche, but the dark souls of ice skating games. And I don't actually know if there are many ice skating games besides this one. I think if you like ice skating in real life, you might actually love How I Learned to Skate, and that's because the game feels like learning to skate in real life. And also a note, that's the only game from the list that I had a bit of an issue running on the Steam Deck, and I had to use Proton GE instead of the default one to actually run the game on the deck. The last game on the list, you could have already seen on my channel, but I figured out I'm gonna give it another shout out. I'm talking here about Neodori Forever, which is a retro racing game, reminding me a lot of those classic arcade racing games, with a bit of a modern twist. I think there is something slightly clunky with the controls, they feel a bit floaty, but maybe that is also supposed to like imitate those old classic arcade machines. If you got to this point of the video, thank you very much for watching, and I would just like to ask you one little thing. Please leave a comment under the video if you like this type of content with more niche games, some of them even without any reviews on Steam. Thanks again for watching, see you in the next video.